So this second challenge is also a part of stage 1. It's suitable for, well shoot, I've done it with second graders, but 3rd through 5th for sure, and even some middle schoolers to get them acquainted. So the second challenge, as you can see, deals with some different buttons than we used in the first one, different shapes. We're working with circles and rings and line segments. So it introduces some new buttons to be used, which is exciting. So I'm going to start off with the goal of this challenge is for students to create a red circle with a white circumference, and then to create a black line segment that will mark the radius and a blue line segment that will mark the diameter. So this again is where you can start pulling in some of your vocabulary. What is radius? What is diameter? Where do they go on the circle? So this can all be done at the same time as they're coding. They can be talking about it, reinforcing those skills. So we will go straight to Bricklayer Light Level 3. Okay, make sure you have a clean workspace. There's nothing there from last time. And the first thing we'll do is we'll open up the level. We're going to create a base plate to build on. And I'm going to go 32, 32 this time. Gives me plenty of space for that circle. And then, like always, we need semicolons at the end of each line. So, if the first thing I need to do is create a red circle with a white circumference, you could ask your students, are you going to use 2 circle functions, or are you going to use a circle function and a ring? Because both can be done. There is always more than one way to solve these challenges and to arrange your coding. So that makes it really open-ended and fun. The exploration is fun of it. And kids like to show you the different ways they came up with than you did for these, so it also makes them proud of their accomplishments. So I think I'm going to start with the red circle first. This is just how I approach the challenge, but like I said, there's more than one way of doing it. So to get a circle, you're going to go over to Function Calls, Shapes, and you'll see right away there's the circle, there's the ring. So I'm going to click, drag, drop, and connect my circle and set my radius. So you'll have to remind the kids, or the kids will remind each other, since you want them to be doing most of the talking. The radius is going to be half of your circle's overall width, diameter. So if you want it large enough, which you do, to put those lines on there and to be seen, you could probably start off with maybe 10 radius, and you have to think of your base plate. If I have a 10 radius and a 10, that means like a 20 diameter. That's going to fit nicely on the 32 by 32. And set your color for the circle, which this challenge has been set at red. And let's set where this is going to go on the grid. Now with circles, these coordinates tell you the midpoint, the center point of the circle. So unlike the 2-dimensional objects, the squares and the rectangles that we were coding in challenge 1, we're not going off of the lower left portion anymore. We're taking it right from the middle and putting it on there. So I want to put mine at 15, 15, no rhyme or reason to that, just because I know I have 32 to work with, and right off the bat, 15 is half of 30, so that's just where my mind went. And you can always move it around later, and I want to see what it looks like, because I'm curious before I start adding to it. So I went over to the show, I dragged, I dropped, I connected the show button, complete with a semicolon. To move this over, be organized. Now I want to run it. See, hey, that looks pretty nice. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to go back to my challenge and say, okay, what's next? A white circumference. So some kids may want to do a ring, and this would be your opportunity to teach them how to put a ring on there. Other kids might have the idea, why can't I just make a bigger white circle and put it behind the red circle and layer the 2? And that would be fine also. So I guess it's whatever you want them to do or what you are doing with them. If they've never coded a ring before, I think this would be a great opportunity to show them. So I'm going to show you how to do it with the ring. I'm gonna go grab my ring, same place where I found the circle, over in the shapes. Drag it over, drop it. I'm gonna quickly put my semicolon on before I forget about it. And now I need to think about the relationship between the circle and the ring circumference. I could choose to put the ring, make it just as big as the circle, but on top of it, or I could choose to make it one larger. I think just for the simplicity, I'm going to make it the same size as my circle, so it just lays on top of it right around the outside. So I'm going to set the radius just as my circle was at 10. Now, thickness, this is where you could get creative. The challenge did not specify how thick of a circumference. I think I'm just gonna make it one cell, and it needs to be white. It's already white. And like I said, I want it right on top of that circle, so the midpoints need to be the same coordinates. 15, 15 checks out. Let's run it and see. There we go. That looks like a nice red circle with a white circumference. So I'm satisfied. I'm going to move on. Now here's where you're marking the radius and the diameter. We need a black line segment for the radius, so I'm going to start there. Now to get lines, it says line right over there. It's a pretty easy one to find. Go ahead and go to the put and line. It's the second one down, line XZ. Drag and drop it. And remember, order is important. What you want to be on the bottom, you put first. And so I want my line segments to be on top of the circle and the circumference. So I put it later in the order. So the two ordered pairs are going to mark the endpoints of your line segment. And it depends on how you're looking at things, your perspective. You could say the left side of the line is the starting point, the right is the end point, but this is a good discussion about kids when you're talking to others about your programming. It's important that you know what the other person is thinking, so you're able to talk about that line segment in the same way. So I have to think how I want to represent this radius. Most kids are used to seeing a radius that starts always in the center and goes maybe off to the right or off to the left. But you could talk about how radius is the same all the way around the circle. So you could choose to make that radius vertical instead of horizontal like you're used to seeing. So just to spice it up, I'm going to make it vertical. So I am going to, I think it was black. I'm going to go ahead and start there. Color. Color is always the easiest part to start. Kind of takes the fear away. They've got one thing down. The hard things are left to go. I'm going to get a semicolon on there. So if I ever have reluctant coders, I always just have them start with the open level, the building the base plate, the show button, the semicolons at the end. That way it looks like to them they've done a lot and it's less intimidating. So if you need to use that, go ahead and do that. So with my starting point, I want to start right in the center, the midpoint of that circle. And I know I've already got that up there on top when I set my circle and my ring down. So I'm going to make 15 the starting point of my segment. And now here's where you have to do some math and your knowledge of how the radius of a circle, what that is. They won't have to count out these cells. That's our hope, that they won't have to do that, that they will use their knowledge of circles to figure this out. If our midpoint is at 15 and our radius is set at 10, and I want to go up from that 15, I'm going to need to add. So 15 plus 10, that would be 25. That's where I want it to stop at, up the top. So my y coordinate needs to be that 25, and I want it the same distance over as the midpoint, right like that. So let's run that and see what we've got. There we go. That looks good. Let's go ahead and make the last part of this challenge, and that is the blue line segment that marks the diameter. So I'm going to go back. I know I need to get a line in there, drag and drop it, change the color to blue, any blue will do, and then grab a semicolon. Okay, Now already the kids should be thinking, I don't want to program this right on top of the radius, otherwise it's not going to show up. So I'm going to need to put this maybe horizontal, a horizontal diameter. So they can't start at the midpoint. I mean, they could and make mistakes to learn it the right way, but they're going to have to figure out if my midpoint of my circle is 15, 15, and there's 10 cells over here, 10 over here, where are the endpoints of my line segment going to be? So this is 15 minus that 10, that's going to take you to 5, and they could count it out. Like I said, we want to get them so good that they don't have to count with their fingers. And we want the y's to be the same as the midpoint because we want the vertical distance the same. So I'm going to go over 5, up 15 for the starting point. And for the end point, if they're hesitant, you can tell them, well, you know the y coordinate's going to need to be the same because you want it to be horizontal. You could go back to the midpoint, 15, 10 cells to, this is your right, would be 25. So you could go ahead and program that in. You could run it just to see, and there it is. So second challenge complete. And of course, if they wanted to rename it, they could go down and rename it or move it around. Hope you enjoyed.